Why I'm going to be a millionaire part 2. Now, if you didn't watch the first video that I released on this a couple of days ago, definitely go back and watch that because I kind of give a breakdown, pretty point by point view as to why I am considering or why becoming a millionaire is such a high priority for me. And I want to give you a bit of the macro view on this, having given you some of that play by play, almost kind of strategic look as to how I'm going to, meet these goals or meet this goal of becoming a millionaire. Now, here's the macro view because I think it's very important and it may give you a better understanding of my mentality and may give you a better understanding of why I'm into gold and silver and things like that. So generally, I think that we are in a time which is towards the end of this essentially golden era for human behavior. And essentially what I'm basically basing this off of is the majority of human history, most people did not own as much and didn't have the ability to own as much as they do now. The thing that we're starting to see now is a bit of a sea change where that ownership is starting to be owned by fewer and fewer people, and more people are owning less. You've probably heard people say there's a thinning out of the middle class. And this is what I would like to, essentially say is the beginning of this transition going back to potentially a society that most humans have been used to. And that's one where there are smaller people at the very top owning pretty much controlling most assets, wealth, and those who are beneath them essentially are kind of, dividing the crumbs up amongst themselves. Now, who knows what society will look like years from now, hundreds of years from now? I don't have a crystal ball in front of me, but what I want to do is to give optionality to my future progeny. I want them to not feel like, man, if only my grandparents made those right moves back when they could have, then we would have been farther along now. I want them to think, man, I can't believe that my grandparents did that with the knowledge or with the thinking that generations down the line, will be better off. And who's to know, who's to say that, things will be what I'm thinking in my head. But the thing is that I'd rather prepare for that potential. So the idea for me wanting to become a millionaire is because I think that there are very few opportunities left time-wise for people to set themselves up to own assets, or essentially, to own assets and have a realistic opportunity in owning those assets, in a realistic way, in a 9-to-5 kind of way, in a, you could say, middle class kind of way. Now, those ways I mean by, having an honest job, honest living, setting aside a lot of money, and putting it into the right vehicles and being able to pass it down to the next generation. Many of you who are baby boomers who are watching this know that, and here's the thing, I'm not a baby boomer. I'm a millennial. But from what I've heard from many people of that generation, it's way easier to purchase a home. We all know that we've all heard those stories of our grandparents, our great-grandparents, buying homes for $10,000, $8,000. And they did this with a paycheck or an annual salary of about $5,000. We all know what inflation does to assets. And that pretty much brings me to the crux of this video. Inflation is going to be a problem moving forward. And those who went out are asset owners. They are not the people who do not own assets. The people who own assets are the ones who get ahead with inflation, hence asset price inflation, hence why homes are ballooning in size, hence why people say the PE ratio of the S&P 500, of the Dow Jones, it's at unreasonable levels, hence why people say take any asset. They may say it's overpriced. Now, the reason why it's overpriced isn't necessarily just the mechanics behind the industry. You have to look at the macro and you have to consider inflation, which is what a lot of people may not consider when they're saying, hey, this is overpriced. It doesn't fit with fundamentals. So generally speaking, in order for me to hit this goal, I'm going to be owning assets, and gold and silver is a part of it. My brokerage account, again, where I buy an ETF pretty much consistently month to month, that tracks the S&P 500 that also pays a dividend, is another one of those vehicles. And I hope to own a home in the future, knock on wood here. And that will also be a part of that story. And, there are other ways you can get into it. I mean, there's a guy actually that I saw in the comment section. I believe his name is Decentralized Dad. And if you're watching this, shout out to you. But he even said, hey, I know you've been talking about Bitcoin recently, and I'm glad you kind of, gave it another look, because for him, he bought a Ferrari recently from his investment in Bitcoin. So the thing is like, you have to look at owning assets as a part of your strategy, getting to a point where you want to, let's say, accumulate wealth, but also think and decide, how am I going to transfer this wealth to the next generation? Having a job, a six-figure job, will live with you, and it won't even die with you. You might get fired, or you might age out, because let's be honest, ageism is a real thing in the workforce. You may age out of that job. You can't even say you'll live and die with it. You'll live with it for a time period. So the thing is, you have to think about what your steps are, what your goals are, early on, so you can take a portion of that income that you're making from your job and set it aside to something that you actually own. You do not own that job. Now, let's move forward and talk about relationships, because many people will say, well, I'm if you're married, you may wind up getting divorced, so on and so forth. In my view, everybody's different, but take a look at you might laugh at me here, but take a look at the Kardashians. Now you might say, what are you talking about? Why are you talking about the Kardashians? Recently, Kim and Kanye West got divorced, but Kanye West just released an album, and you would think with people who are just freshly divorced, they don't want to have anything to do with one another. They're going to split up assets, so on and so forth. Kim Kardashian took her kids to see her Kanye West's album release party or something like that every single time. She's no longer married to this guy. Recently, they also went to the Met Gala together. The thing is, and this is something that I believe Kris Jenner probably, pumped into Kim Kardashian's head, is that family, even if you get divorced or break up, is the most important thing that you need to build and hold on to. You could even say it's the most important institution. Some people might kind of, shirk at that. But I believe that they look at family as a part of their legacy, not just, I had some kids, they're nice, they're cool, and then when I die, hey, they'll still live on. They look at them as an extension of what they are and what they've built, and they hope to see that continue through them. And honestly, I look at my kids in the same way, or my kids in the future, knock on wood again, I look at them in the same way. I don't want to be extremely controlling of them, but I will be very involved, and I will mold them from the very beginning. And I will say, look, there are certain things that people are going to get into in life. What you need to do is not be passive. Most people are passive and live life in the passenger seat. You have to take control of your life, put both hands on the wheel. And one of the reasons why you need to do that is because, again, being a passenger, many people will just live and have a job and that's it. But in order to control assets and also pass it down to your kids, you need to know and feel what it's like to control and have life firmly clutched in your hands and take it down the path to your destination. You need to have a destination as well. So that's something that I'm going to be talking to my children about. But at the end of the day, a part of what they need to be aware of, and a part of what I'm going to try to instill in them, is that you need to own assets because inflation is going to benefit you. Inflation will hurt you if you don't own assets. So this has been a longer video, but I want to explain a little bit more in the macro sense why I'm going to be a millionaire.